Episode 57A, My Journey from Salesman to Entrepreneur. I considered not making a podcast from this particular struggling upward type story from my book, Growing Up Unwashed. My thoughts were that it was too much of a I love me story and I need to squelch my hubris often. But on the other hand, there is advice and good example within the story that some down and out folks might take to improve their lives. So here it is. Peter Drucker once said, "There is the risk you cannot afford to take, and there is the risk you can't afford not to take. Both of those above mentioned risks show up in my employment history in the 50s and the 60s and above." After Jean and I were married in 1962 and settling down a little, I discovered that finding a job that challenged my abilities and paid well was very difficult. I never finished my college bachelor's degree, and the better sales positions required a degree. The previous Boston bias against Catholics never affected my employment. I was always a very good salesman, unafraid of cold calling, ballsy as hell, and motivated by commissions. I also worked hard. My idea of a good job at that time was one that provided a good base pay, a company car, an expense account, and a commission plan that was not impossible to implement. Many such incentive plans were designed to fail because some employers set up plans that serially exploited salesmen. For instance, another hopeful salesman would be hired after the first provided all he could in sales and yet still failed to reach the impossible sales quota. When we married, I was a driver salesman for Columbia Packing, located at Boston's New Market off Mass Ave. Before Columbia, I worked as a driver salesman for two other Boston meat packers. Columbia was one of the largest meat packers in New England. The company processed frankfurters, sausages, cold cuts, smoked shoulders, hams, and other meat products. Driver salesmen like me sold and delivered the meat products from a big 2.5-ton refrigerated truck. We called on an array of customers from established routes, like meat markets, delis, supermarkets, restaurants, and sandwich shops. I was paid at base and earned a pretty good commission. I would start at 6 a.m. and work until 4 or 5 p.m., sometimes later. In the meat business, I learned about human nature. I picked up many ethnic slang words from my many ethnic markets. I could cuss a little in Yiddish, Italian, Polish, Spanish, Arabic, and Greek. The most important lesson that I learned was that persistence overcomes everything else. I tried many methods to get that good job. Reading the Sunday Boston Globe Classified regularly, going to paid employment agencies and to the Free State Employment Agency, talking to friends and reading other Massachusetts newspaper classified, and anything else I could think of. There was no monster.com or internet then. Most of my friends had graduated from college, either BC, BU, or Northeastern. They were working in so-called executive training programs at local or national firms, just the kind of job I thought I wanted. Business was very good in the 60s, so jobs were plentiful. But that good job for me was elusive. Although I was always a risk taker, I was afraid of a 100% commission job. I found out later that I was unnecessarily afraid. We were about to have our first, Jenny, and soon Erin would be coming along also. I was very nervous about counting on sales that might never occur. Jean was, as she was always, a great encourager and a good mother, staying at home with the kids. We both wanted it that way. I learned later that the correct all-commission job would have earned much more than the base pay plus incentive arrangement. It was a risk I could not afford not to take, and I did not take that risk. Applying for sales jobs that were advertised in the newspaper required a well-designed resume, a custom cover letter, and much patience. When a company representative responded to my written resume letter and came to Boston for job interviews, it required me to carry a suit, shirt, tie, and a good pair of dress shoes in my truck so I could change for the interview. Such interviews were usually held in Boston hotels. I had to play hooky for my route for a few hours to make those appointments. I began to get better jobs. One job was for the Rosecrest Sportswear Company off Summer Street near South Station as an inside salesman. They made women's clothing, and my job was to aid the manufacturer's representatives out in the field. It was an everyday stuck-in-the-office job that did not agree with me, but I thought I might be able to work it into a sales territory. The outside commission territory men were making $100,000 a year in 1964. That was top money. I found out later that relatives of the owners took any open territory. Irving, not Roddy, got the good job. Danny Anderson, a friend from the Sevens, a very cool watering hole on Boston's Charles Street, recommended me for a sales job with Treasure Greetings. He had a territory already. They were wagon jobbers of consignment greeting cards to small-town second-tier supermarkets throughout New England. The salesman drove Volkswagen trucks with racks of cards set up inside. We sold greeting cards and refilled card racks at IGA stores and other more small family-owned grocery stores. My territory was the North Shore of Boston, Maine, and New Hampshire. I could drive home at night when I did the Mass and New Hampshire routes. With Maine, I was gone most of the week. My pay was a base plus commissions, and I did okay financially. I took my first airplane ride at that time. In 1963, on orders from Treasure Greetings, I flew on a Mohawk Airlines propeller plane to Albany, New York to pick up my Volkswagen truck, and then I drove it back to Boston. Here's a little vignette from my Maine travels in the 60s. One of my customers was an IGA store in Rockland, Maine, which was a fishing and sardine canning town. When I called on that store, I stayed in the only hotel in town, the Thorndike Hotel. There were no motels. The first time I was there, I came in late in the evening, hearing the music, laughter, and noise coming from the attached restaurant. I asked the room clerk, "What's going on?" He replied, "There was a country band playing that night with dancing." Then he added, "Take a look at the blackboard over the bar." I walked into the bar, and on the blackboard in chalk was a listing of the fishing boats that had gone out that day. When groundfish fishing boats go out, it is for long periods, sometimes weeks. According to the chalkboard, there were 10 or more ships out. I went back into the lobby and I commented, "Quite a few fishing boats out today." The clerk then wisecracked, "Yeah, and so are the fisherman's wife out." The way it worked was when the boats went out, a lot of wives went out also, and at the Thorndike Hotel. If this episode sparked something for you, head to the show notes and make a donation. Buy Me a Coffee is an app that allows consumers of podcasts, YouTube, etc., who appreciate a creator's podcast, in this case mine, to donate. That helps keep my mic on and my camera on and my stories flowing. Rather than suggest a donation amount, please judge what value you get from this and other episodes and join my supporters. Make your donation to buymeacoffee.com, one long word, /degreasings, DEGREASINGS, buymeacoffee.com /degreasings. Thank you.